Get out! You have 24 hours to move. The woman was spray painting my mailbox at 7 a.m., screaming like a banshee. What the hell are you doing? HOA enforcement. This orange abomination violates community standards. Lady, I'm not in your HOA. I don't care, Brenda Whitmore exploded, throwing the paint can at my door. You'll follow our rules or get out. She grabbed papers from her Lexus and hurled them at me. Eviction notice. 24 hours. I caught the papers, stunned. The smell of wet paint and psychotic rage filled the air. You can't evict someone from their own house. Watch me, she shrieked, speeding off. I stood there holding fake eviction papers, realizing I'd just met my worst nightmare neighbor. This crazy woman thought she could force me out of my own home. What would you do if someone tried to evict you from your own property? Where are you watching from? My name's Marcus Blackwood, and I'd bought this house for one reason: freedom from HOA tyranny. After my divorce took half of everything, I specifically searched for a non-HOA property. This 1960s ranch house was perfect original hardwood that creaked with character, a basement that smelled of old wood and diesel from my motorcycle, and most importantly, it sat outside Maple Grove HOA's jurisdiction. The property line was crystal clear. Stone boundary markers from 1962 separated my lot from their beige McMansion paradise. When the HOA incorporated in 1993, my house and 3 others were specifically excluded. The previous owner, Mrs. Stella, had refused to join. Smart woman. Brenda Whitmore lived 50 feet away in a $600,000 cookie-cutter house, identical to 30 others except for approved paint colors: beige, cream, or off-white. Her white Lexus bore a blessed license plate, frame first red flag I should have noticed. As HOA board president for 8 years, Brenda measured grass with actual rulers and conducted surprise inspections. Married to City Councilman Roger Whitmore, she wielded power like a weapon against anyone who threatened her vision of suburban perfection. But I wasn't her subject. My deed proved it. That's what made her morning vandalism so insane. After she sped away, I stood holding her crayon-filled eviction notice, a downloaded template with 0 legal authority. The smell of wet paint mixed with my growing anger. I photographed everything and installed security cameras that afternoon. Jake Patterson at the hardware store grinned while ringing up my purchase. That woman's been forcing out non-HOA folks for years, he warned. Thinks she runs the whole neighborhood. She doesn't run me. Good luck, son. You're gonna need it. Jake was right. The next morning, Brenda returned with nuclear escalation. I was eating breakfast when car doors slammed like gunshots. Through my window, I watched Brenda leading a city code enforcement officer directly to my front door. Behind them, 3 women in matching polo shirts documented everything with professional cameras. The knock rattled my coffee mug. Mr. Blackwood? Officer Martinez, code enforcement. We've received multiple complaints about zoning violations. Brenda stood behind him, smiling like a shark. I'm just here as a concerned neighbor. What violations? I asked. Officer Martinez looked uncomfortable. Alleged commercial vehicle parking, non-conforming mailbox installation, and... He checked his notes. Improper storage of business equipment. My truck was personal. The mailbox was original to the house. And my motorcycle wasn't business equipment. These complaints are fabricated, I said. Sir, I have to investigate every report. But honestly, Martinez glanced at Brenda, then lowered his voice. Your property looks fine. Someone's just persistent about filing paperwork. After they left, Brenda lingered. Her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of corruption. Marcus, I've lived here 15 years. I've seen what happens to properties that don't maintain standards. Sometimes the market adjusts things naturally. Sometimes code enforcement finds issues that require expensive fixes. Sometimes neighbors get creative about protecting their investments. The threat was crystal clear. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you about reality. Mrs. Stella learned the hard way all that stress from constant complaints, constant inspections. Poor woman's health just declined. Amazing how quickly her family sold after the funeral. My blood ran cold. This psychopath had harassed an elderly woman to death. Get off my property, now. 24 hours, Marcus. Fix the violations or face the consequences. That evening I found spray paint on my garage door. Move or else. The paper trail was obvious. Brenda had weaponized city services, manufactured violations, and essentially confessed to terrorizing Mrs. Stella into an early grave. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd threatened the wrong guy. I'd spent 20 years in IT consulting, dealing with corporate bullies and hostile takeovers. I knew how to research, document, and plan strategic responses. War had been declared. Time to show this HOA tyrant what real power looked like. The taste of revenge was already sweet. Brenda didn't wait 24 hours. She launched her full assault at dawn. I was showering when my phone exploded with notifications. Security cameras had detected movement at 6 a.m. Brenda was conducting what looked like a military reconnaissance mission around my property. By the time I got dressed, she'd already taken 47 photos. My driveway, my windows, my electrical meter, even my garbage cans. The woman had brought a telephoto lens like she was paparazzi stalking a celebrity. "Morning, Marcus," she called out sweetly when she saw me. "Just updating our neighborhood safety records. Get off my property." I'm on the public sidewalk. She was right, technically. But she kept stepping onto my land for better camera angles, her designer heels leaving divots in my freshly watered grass. Over the next 3 days, Brenda filed complaints faster than a machine gun fires bullets. My truck was improperly parked in my own driveway. My mailbox was a safety hazard. It had been there since 1970. My motorcycle was creating noise pollution. I'd started it exactly once. Each complaint triggered another visit from code enforcement. Officer Martinez looked increasingly embarrassed, the smell of his nervous sweat mixing with his cheap cologne. "She's filing papers every 6 hours, he admitted during visit number 4. "Look, your property's clean, but I have to respond to every report. It's the law." But I wasn't just sitting there taking it. While Brenda played her harassment game, I was playing chess. First move, I researched every complaint she'd ever filed in the past 5 years. Public records are beautiful things. Turns out, Brenda had filed 847 complaints against non-HOA properties. 0 complaints against HOA members, even when their violations were obvious. The pattern was crystal clear systematic harassment of anyone outside her control. Second move, I started documenting everything. Every photo she took, every complaint filed, every interaction recorded. My security system captured her trespassing onto my property 14 times in 3 days. Third move, I dug deeper into Brenda's business dealings. Her real estate license showed interesting patterns. She'd been the listing agent for 3 non-HOA properties that sold below market value in the past 2 years. All 3 sellers had been harassed by code enforcement complaints before selling. I remembered reading somewhere that HOAs can't just claim authority over properties that existed before they were formed, something about retroactive enforcement being legally questionable. More importantly, systematically harassing people to force property sales sounded like it could be illegal interference with property rights. Then came the twist that changed everything. Thursday morning, I discovered my sprinkler system had been accidentally damaged during utility maintenance she'd requested. The city worker looked confused when I asked about it. "Ma'am said there was a gas leak concern near your irrigation lines. Weird thing is, we didn't find any gas lines there." The damage would cost $800 to repair. But here's what Brenda didn't know. My cameras had night vision. The footage was beautiful. Crystal clear video of Brenda at 2 a.m. using a shovel to deliberately damage my sprinkler heads while muttering about teaching lessons to stubborn neighbors. The crunch of plastic breaking under her designer boots was oddly satisfying to watch. That's when I made my counterpunch, and it was devastating. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I sent the video evidence to all 5 HOA board members, the local newspaper, and her real estate broker with a simple note. "Is this the kind of leadership Maple Grove residents expect?" The response was nuclear. Brenda's phone started ringing before she'd even gotten home from her vandalism mission. 2 board members called emergency meetings. Her deputy, Sandra Walsh, publicly questioned whether Brenda's aggressive advocacy was going too far. The newspaper called asking for comment. Her real estate broker was furious. Vandalism while representing the company could cost Brenda her license. But Brenda's reaction to being challenged was pure meltdown. Friday morning, she stood in my driveway screaming at my house like a lunatic. My cameras caught every glorious second. "You think you're smart? I've been doing this for 8 years. I know every city official, every inspector, every judge." Neighbors came out to watch the spectacle. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street shook her head sadly. Jake Patterson just grinned and gave me a thumbs up. "You'll move or I'll destroy you." Brenda shrieked, spittle flying from her mouth. The taste of victory was sweeter than morning coffee. For the first time since this war started, Brenda looked rattled. Her perfect suburban dictator facade was cracking, and the cracks were showing to everyone who mattered. But I should have known better than to celebrate early. Because Brenda Whitmore wasn't just crazy, she was connected, vindictive, and apparently had zero limits on how far she'd go to win. The sound of her heels clicking away on my driveway carried a promise. This was just round one, and she was about to bring out the big guns. Brenda's big guns turned out to be her husband's city council connections and a level of corruption that would make a mob boss proud. Monday morning, I woke up to 3 official vehicles parked outside my house like I was running a meth lab. Code enforcement, fire safety inspection, and something called environmental health services. All 3 departments had received urgent complaints requiring immediate investigation. Officer Martinez looked mortified when he knocked on my door. "Marcus, I'm really sorry about this. We got orders from upstairs to do a comprehensive property review. Let me guess, Mrs. Whitmore filed another complaint?" Actually, this one came through Councilman Whitmore's office. Something about public safety concerns and potential environmental hazards. The smell of political corruption hung in the air thicker than the diesel fumes from their idling trucks. For 3 hours, they combed through my property looking for violations that didn't exist. They tested my well water, perfectly clean. They measured my fence height, exactly to code. They even inspected my electrical panel while the acrid smell of their equipment filled my basement. The fire inspector found nothing. The environmental guy found nothing, but they all had to file reports anyway because orders from the top. While this circus was happening, Brenda stood on the sidewalk taking photos like she was documenting a crime scene. She'd brought coffee and donuts for the inspectors, playing the role of concerned neighbor to perfection. But here's where her overconfidence became her fatal mistake. I overheard her bragging to the environmental inspector, "Once you find the violations, we can force a cleanup that'll cost him $50,000. Nobody maintains these old properties properly. Then he'll be begging to sell." She didn't know I was recording everything through my window. That afternoon, I made my strategic response. Instead of fighting the system, I decided to use it against them. I researched every property transaction Roger Whitmore had been involved with as a city councilman. Public records revealed a fascinating pattern. Properties that received comprehensive inspections often sold quickly afterward, many to buyers connected to local development companies. I also remembered reading about fair housing laws that specifically prohibit real estate agents from steering clients away from certain neighborhoods based on character or property standards. Discriminatory practices carry heavy penalties, including license revocation. Then I found the smoking gun that changed everything. Brenda's real estate website had a section called Preferred Neighborhoods that exclusively featured HOA communities. Her client testimonials included phrases like, "Brenda helped us avoid problematic areas," and "she steered us towards stable, well-maintained communities." The mini twist came when I dug deeper into her recent sales. 3 non-HOA properties had sold below market value after intensive code enforcement campaigns. All 3 buyers were connected to Whitmore Development, LLC-Rogers Consulting Company. This wasn't just harassment. This was an organized real estate scam using government authority to force below-market sales. My counterpunch was surgical and devastating. First, I filed complaints with the State Real Estate Commission, complete with documentation of discriminatory practices and evidence of using city resources for personal business benefit. Second, I contacted the State Ethics Commission about Roger's conflict of interest using his counsel position to target properties for his wife's business advantage. Third, I sent everything to the newspaper's investigative reporter, including audio of Brenda discussing manufactured violations. The response was immediate and brutal. Tuesday morning, Brenda's real estate broker received the state complaint. By noon, she was suspended pending investigation. Her discriminatory website content disappeared by 2 p.m. Wednesday, the Ethics Commission announced a formal review of Roger Whitmore's business dealings. But Brenda's reaction to losing control was pure, desperate panic. Thursday morning, she showed up at my door, trembling with barely contained rage, her usually perfect makeup smudged and her voice shaking. "Marcus, I think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, her words coming out too fast. The scent of her desperation was stronger than her expensive perfume, mixed with the bitter smell of fear sweat. "What do you want, Brenda?" "What if I could help you? Relocate somewhere more suitable. Cash offer, 50,000 above market value, plus I cover all moving expenses." The desperation in her voice was delicious. "I'm not selling." Her facade cracked completely. "You don't understand. If this investigation continues, it'll destroy everything. My license, Roger's career, our whole life. Should have thought about that before vandalizing my property. Please." She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "Name your price. Anything." I pulled away, disgusted. "Get off my property before I call the police." "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed, her mask finally falling completely. "This investigation will ruin innocent people, my family, my children's futures. You should have considered that before becoming a criminal." That evening, the newspaper published their bombshell article. "City Councilman and HOA President under investigation for real estate corruption scheme." Brenda's empire was crumbling, but cornered animals fight the dirtiest. And I was about to learn just how dirty Brenda Whitmore could get. Brenda's desperation turned her into something far more dangerous than a petty HOA tyrant. She became a woman with absolutely nothing left to lose. Friday morning, I woke up to the sound of teenagers laughing outside my window at 6 a.m. on a school day. Through my blinds, I watched 5 kids from the HOA neighborhood setting up what looked like a tailgate party on the public sidewalk directly in front of my house. Speakers, folding chairs, energy drinks, and enough teenage attitude to power a small city. "Good morning, Marcus," one of them shouted toward my window. "Hope you don't mind the music." They cranked up rap music loud enough to wake the dead. The bass thumped through my walls like a jackhammer, rattling my coffee mug and making my teeth ache from the vibrations. I called the police about the noise ordinance. When Officer Martinez arrived, the kids had permits. Actual city permits for a youth community awareness event scheduled from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. "Let me guess," I said. "These permits came through Councilman Whitmore's office?" Martinez looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Marcus. Permits are legal. My hands are tied. But here's what the kids didn't expect. I'd been dealing with obnoxious teenagers since my daughter was in high school. I knew exactly how to handle this. Instead of complaining, I joined them. I set up my own speaker system, bigger and louder than theirs, and started playing polka music at maximum volume. The confused looks on their faces as accordion melodies drowned out their rap beats was absolutely priceless. "This is awesome," I shouted over the music. "Community bonding through cultural exchange." Within 2 hours, they packed up and left. Turns out teenagers hate polka more than they hate adults telling them to be quiet. But Brenda's real escalation came that afternoon. I discovered someone had filed an anonymous complaint with the IRS claiming I was running an unreported business from my home. The investigation notice arrived by certified mail, complete with threats of penalties and audits. The complaint was detailed and specific, too specific for a random neighbor to know. Someone had been watching my work schedule, documenting my client video calls, even noting when UPS delivered computer equipment. That evening, things got personal. My daughter Zoe called, crying. Someone had been asking questions about me at her college, claiming to be conducting a background check for employment purposes. They'd contacted her professors, her friends, even her boss at the campus bookstore. "Dad, they're saying you might be involved in illegal activities," she sobbed. "My roommate's parents are asking if she should find a different living situation." The taste of pure rage filled my mouth like bitter metal. Harassing me was one thing. Going after my daughter crossed every line imaginable. I remembered reading that private investigators need licenses and have legal limits on their activities. Impersonating employers or making false claims during investigations could violate state laws governing PY conduct. The mini-twist came when I tracked down the source. Jake Patterson called me that evening with interesting news. "Marcus, you know that PI who was nosing around your place, Larry Stubbs? Well, he's been drinking at my brother's bar, complaining about his latest client." "What kind of complaints?" "Says she's asking him to do things that aren't exactly legal. Wants him to plant evidence, make false reports, dig up dirt on family members. Guy's getting nervous about keeping his license." This was the break I needed. I researched Larry Stubbs and found his contact information. Instead of confronting Brenda directly, I called him. Mr. Stubbs? This is Marcus Blackwood. I believe you've been investigating me. Long pause. I can't discuss ongoing investigations, even when they involve illegal activities, because falsely claiming to conduct employment background checks could cost you your license. Another pause. I think we should meet. Saturday afternoon, Larry Stubbs sat in my kitchen looking like a man who'd sold his soul and wanted to buy it back. The smell of his nervous sweat mixed with bitter coffee and the lingering scent of his cheap cologne. Look, Mr. Blackwood, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never had a client ask me to break the law before. What exactly has she asked you to do? Plant drug paraphernalia in your garage during a security check. File false reports claiming you threatened neighbors. Even suggested I should find evidence of tax evasion on your property. He laid out Brenda's criminal conspiracy with the weary resignation of a man confessing his sins. She's paying cash, off the books, specifically so there's no paper trail. But I got kids, you know? I can't risk my license for this crazy woman. What do you want to do about it? I want to give you copies of her text messages and recorded phone calls. Let you handle it however you see fit. In exchange for immunity when this all comes out, because it's going to come out and I don't want to go down with her ship. That evening, I sat reviewing Larry's evidence hours of recordings and dozens of text messages proving Brenda's conspiracy to frame me for multiple federal crimes. The woman had completely lost her mind, but she'd also just handed me enough evidence to send her to prison. Time for the nuclear option. The nuclear option came from an unexpected source. My friend Tony, who worked as a title researcher for the county. Marcus, you're not going to believe what I found, he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table like he was revealing state secrets. The papers smelled like old ink and courthouse dust, but what they revealed was pure evil. Look at this original 1993 incorporation document. Tony pointed to a signature line with trembling fingers. Whitmore Development Company was the primary developer for Maple Grove subdivision. And guess who owned Whitmore Development? Roger's father? Brenda's father, actually. Richard Whitmore. She was a Whitmore before she married Roger, kept the name for business reasons. Tony's finger traced property lines on the original plat. Here's the sick part. When they incorporated the HOA, they deliberately excluded certain lots, including mine, yours and 4 others, but not because the owners refused to join. They were excluded as part of a long-term investment scam. Tony pulled out a stack of property transaction records, his hands shaking with anger. Brenda's been systematically destroying lives for the past decade. 3 houses purchased significantly below market value after the owners were harassed into selling. The pattern was devastating. Each non-HOA property owner had faced identical harassment campaigns, code enforcement complaints, neighborhood pressure, mysterious property damage, psychological warfare. All had eventually sold to buyers connected to Whitmore Development subsidiaries. She's been running this scam for years, I realized, the taste of bile rising in my throat. Gets worse. Look at this internal HOA memo from 2019. Tony handed me a document that made my blood freeze. She wrote this herself, outlining strategies for encouraging non-compliance property sales. The memo detailed everything: how to manufacture violations, which city officials to contact, even suggested property damage techniques that would be difficult to trace. The clinical, calculated tone made it read like a terrorist training manual. There's more. Mrs. Stella, your predecessor? Tony's voice cracked. She didn't just die of old age. According to her granddaughter Rebecca, the stress from constant harassment triggered fatal heart problems. Brenda literally tortured that sweet old woman to death. The smell of Tony's rage sweat filled my kitchen as the full horror sank in. This wasn't just about my property anymore. This was about exposing a decade-long criminal conspiracy that had already killed an innocent woman. Tony, how much money are we talking about? If Brenda successfully forced all excluded properties to sell below market and redeveloped them as luxury HOA homes, conservatively $200,000 profit per lot, with 4 remaining lots including yours, we're looking at nearly $1 million in blood money. That evening I called Rebecca Stella, Mrs. Stella's granddaughter, who happened to be a lawyer. When I explained what we'd discovered, her voice turned Arctic cold. Mr. Blackwood, my grandmother died clutching stress medication because that monster made her life hell for 2 years. If you're saying this was part of a coordinated scheme to murder her for profit, I have documentation proving it. Then we're going to destroy her completely. Rebecca agreed to review all evidence and help build a comprehensive legal case. We weren't just fighting harassment anymore, we were exposing fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and premeditated murder for financial gain. But the most shocking revelation came last. Tony found property records showing Brenda had already applied for development permits for my lot and the 2 remaining excluded properties. She'd been so confident in her harassment strategy that she'd started the paperwork to demolish our houses before we'd even sold. "She's been planning your destruction for 3 years," Tony whispered, his voice hollow. "This whole campaign against you wasn't reactive. It was premeditated attempted murder." The woman hadn't just declared war on me. She'd been planning my assassination since the day I bought the house, maybe even before Mrs. Stella's body was cold. Now I understood the stakes. This wasn't about HOA rules or property values. It was about a $1 million murder scheme disguised as suburban governance. Time to make sure Brenda's criminal empire died instead of me. Rebecca Stella arrived at my house Sunday morning carrying a briefcase that looked like it could hold nuclear launch codes. Her grandmother's death had transformed her from a corporate lawyer into a woman on a mission for justice. "Mr. Blackwood, I've reviewed everything Tony provided. What we have here isn't just harassment, it's organized crime masquerading as suburban governance." She spread legal documents across my dining room table with the precision of a surgeon preparing for operation. The smell of fresh ink from her legal pads mixed with the determination radiating from every pore. First, the criminal charges we can pursue: conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse resulting in death, extortion, bribery of public officials, and filing false police reports. That's potentially 20 years in federal prison. What about the civil case? Wrongful death, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with property rights, and civil conspiracy. We're looking at millions in damages, plus punitive awards that could bankrupt her completely. Tony joined us with additional ammunition. He'd mapped every property transaction in a 5-mile radius, creating a visual timeline of Brenda's decade-long crime spree. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to red dots on his map. Every non-HOA property that sold below market was followed by intensive development within 18 months. She's been systematically cleansing the neighborhood of anyone outside her control. But we needed more than documents to destroy her. We needed a team. Officer Martinez knocked on my door that afternoon, looking nervous but determined. "Marcus, I can't officially help you, but I can tell you that several of us in the department have been uncomfortable with the complaint volume from the Whitmores." "How uncomfortable?" "Uncomfortable enough that I've been keeping copies of every ridiculous report they've filed. Turns out documenting abuse of city services is part of my job." He handed me a thick folder. Internal memos, complaint forms, even recordings of Roger Whitmore screaming at my captain about enforcement priorities. This proves they've been weaponizing city government. Jake Patterson brought neighborhood intelligence. 3 other non-HOA residents had been receiving similar harassment, all too scared to speak up until now. Mrs. Rodriguez across the street had documented Brenda's late-night inspections with her own security cameras. "She's been taking photos of people through their windows," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered, as if Brenda might be listening. "I got video of her using some kind of telescopic camera, trying to see inside bedrooms." The criminal invasion of privacy charges kept mounting, but our secret weapon was Larry Stubbs, the private investigator who'd grown a conscience. He met us at a diner outside town, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. "She's completely lost it," he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "This contains every conversation I recorded, every text message, every email. She's been planning to plant drugs in your garage during a fake wellness check she arranged with dirty cops." The flash drive contained hours of audio evidence, including Brenda discussing specific illegal activities with timestamps and locations. She'd essentially confessed to every crime we suspected, recorded in her own voice. I remembered reading somewhere that conspiracy charges don't require the actual crimes to be completed, just evidence of planning and taking steps toward commission. Brenda had handed us enough evidence to convict her of conspiracy even if she never touched my property again. "There's something else," Larry continued. She's been researching your daughter's school schedule, your ex-wife's address, even your work clients. She's planning to expand the harassment campaign to everyone you care about. The taste of protective rage flooded my mouth. This had gone far beyond property disputes into stalking and targeted harassment of my family. Rebecca took charge of the legal strategy. We're going to coordinate simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts: criminal complaints with the state attorney general, civil lawsuits in federal court, ethics violations with the real estate commission, and corruption charges against Roger. What about the media? I've contacted investigative reporters from 3 newspapers and 2 television stations. A suburban murder conspiracy sells papers and gets ratings. Tony would handle the documentation, creating timeline exhibits and property transaction evidence that would be impossible to deny. Officer Martinez would provide internal police records showing abuse of city services. Larry would testify about the criminal conspiracy in exchange for immunity. But here's the beautiful part. Rebecca smiled like a shark scenting blood. We're going to let Brenda hang herself in public. What do you mean? Next week's city council meeting. Roger's on the agenda to discuss neighborhood improvement initiatives. Brenda will be there to support him, probably planning another attack on you. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We'd attend the meeting as concerned citizens, present our evidence publicly, and watch Brenda's reaction. With cameras rolling and media present, she'd either confess under pressure or lie under oath, both criminal offenses. She's spent 10 years thinking she's untouchable, Rebecca said, closing her briefcase with the finality of a coffin lid. Time to show her what happens when you torture the wrong family. The smell of impending justice filled my kitchen like expensive perfume, but cleaner and more honest. War was about to become slaughter. Brenda must have sensed the walls closing in because she went absolutely feral. Monday morning, I discovered my sprinkler system had been accidentally damaged again, this time by a landscape crew that claimed they'd been hired to improve neighborhood aesthetics. The workers looked confused when I asked who hired them. Lady in a white Lexus paid us cash to trim some overgrown areas, the foreman said, gesturing at my perfectly maintained hedge that was now chopped to stumps. Said she was with the Neighborhood Association. The smell of fresh mulch and Brenda's desperation filled the air as I surveyed $2,000 worth of deliberate damage. But that was just the warm-up act. Tuesday, I got a call from the IRS about additional concerns regarding my unreported income. Someone had submitted detailed financial records claiming I was earning money from illegal gambling operations and unreported cryptocurrency trading. The agent sounded embarrassed. Mr. Blackwood, I have to investigate every complaint, but these allegations are unusually specific and poorly documented, almost like someone fabricated them. Wednesday brought the health department investigating anonymous reports of chemical storage violations and potential environmental contamination. They found nothing, of course, but spent 3 hours testing soil samples while Brenda watched from her driveway like she was supervising a crime scene. The harassment campaign had evolved into full-scale economic warfare designed to bankrupt me with investigation costs and property damage. While this circus was happening, I was quietly documenting everything. My cameras captured Brenda directing the landscape crew to trim more aggressively. Audio recordings caught her coaching anonymous complainants on what to report to various agencies. But her biggest mistake was underestimating my allies. Rebecca Stella had been busy filing preliminary injunctions against further harassment. Officer Martinez had started documenting every frivolous complaint as potential abuse of city services. Tony was tracking the financial trail of cash payments to various contractors working on my property. The mini twist came Thursday afternoon when Brenda played her most desperate card yet. A black sedan pulled up to my house, and 2 men in cheap suits knocked on my door. They flashed badges identifying themselves as federal agents investigating financial crimes and tax evasion. Mr. Blackwood, we need to search your property for evidence of unreported income and illegal business activities. Something felt wrong. Real federal agents don't just show up without warrants or proper documentation. I asked to see their credentials more carefully. The badges were fake. Expensive fakes, but fake nonetheless. These weren't federal agents. They were actors hired to intimidate me into confessing to crimes I hadn't committed. Gentlemen, I'm going to need you to leave my property immediately, I said, already reaching for my phone to call real police. That's when they dropped the act. Look, buddy, we were hired to scare you into cooperating. Lady paid us $500 to show up and act official. No harm intended. I convinced them to stay and explain everything to Officer Martinez when he arrived. Turns out, Brenda had hired them through Craigslist, paying cash for what she called a neighborhood prank that had escalated into impersonating federal officers, a serious felony. But Brenda's nuclear option was still coming. Friday morning, I woke up to find "Drug House" spray-painted across my garage door in red letters 3 feet tall. Anonymous flyers had been distributed throughout both neighborhoods claiming I was running a methamphetamine operation and warning parents to keep children away. The psychological warfare was designed to destroy my reputation permanently, making it impossible to live peacefully even if I won the legal battle. But here's what Brenda didn't know. I'd been expecting this escalation. Larry Stubbs had warned me about her plan to plant evidence during a fake police raid, so when I saw patrol cars approaching my house that afternoon, I was ready. 6 officers surrounded my property, claiming they had credible reports of drug manufacturing and needed to conduct an immediate search. "Officers, I'm going to make this easy for you," I announced loudly enough for my cameras to record everything. "I waive any right to refuse this search. Please document everything you find, especially anything that seems suspiciously planted." The lead officer looked confused. Most people don't eagerly consent to drug searches. They found exactly what Larry had predicted, a bag of white powder hidden under my workbench that definitely hadn't been there the day before. But here's the beautiful part. The bag still had Brenda's fingerprints on it. "Sir, we're going to need to test this substance," the officer said, holding up the evidence bag. "Please do. And while you're at it, please run fingerprint analysis on the bag itself. I think you'll find some interesting results." That evening, I got a call from the police lab. The drugs were baking soda, and the fingerprints belonged to Brenda Whitmore. She'd just handed us evidence of attempted evidence tampering, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit drug-related felonies. The taste of victory was getting sweeter every day, but I could smell Brenda's desperation growing stronger. A cornered animal with nothing left to lose was about to make her final, fatal mistake. Brenda's final week of freedom was a masterclass in how desperation makes people stupid. Monday morning, she made the mistake that would seal her fate forever. I was drinking coffee when I heard cars pulling up outside. Through my window, I watched Brenda directing what looked like a moving crew toward my house. 3 men with dollies and boxes were walking straight across my lawn toward my front door. "Excuse me," I called out, stepping onto my porch. "What's going on here?" "Eviction service," the lead guy announced, waving official-looking papers. "We're here to secure the property and remove belongings per court order." The papers were elaborate forgeries, complete with fake court seals and a judge's signature. Brenda had hired actors and prop masters to stage a fake eviction, probably planning to change my locks and claim legal possession of my house. "Gentlemen, this property is not under any eviction proceedings. You're being used to commit breaking and entering." But here's where Brenda's arrogance finally destroyed her. She couldn't resist gloating. "Marcus!" she called from the sidewalk, her voice dripping fake sympathy. "I tried to warn you this would happen. When you don't follow community standards, there are consequences." She didn't know my cameras were recording everything in 4K resolution, including audio of her orchestrating the fake eviction while standing on public property. The movers looked increasingly uncomfortable as I explained they were participating in felony fraud. When I offered to call real police to verify the court order, they dropped their equipment and left. Brenda's reaction was pure meltdown. "You can't keep getting away with this!" she screamed, charging across my lawn like a rabid animal. "I've spent years planning this. Years!" The confession was beautiful. My cameras captured her admitting to years of premeditated harassment while she physically attacked my mailbox with her car keys, scratching deep gouges into the metal. But Tuesday brought the escalation that crossed every legal line imaginable. I discovered someone had broken into my house while I was at the grocery store. Nothing was stolen, but my home office had been searched, and several important documents were missing, including backup copies of my deed and property records. The break-in was professional. No broken windows or obvious damage, just subtle signs that someone with lock-picking skills had conducted a thorough search. Wednesday, Those stolen documents appeared in a public filing claiming I'd been illegally occupying the property and that my deed was fraudulent. The filing requested immediate law enforcement intervention to remove a dangerous squatter. Brenda had escalated from harassment to burglary to filing false legal documents with county authorities. But her final mistake was the most desperate and stupid yet. Thursday afternoon, she showed up at my door with what appeared to be a legal settlement offer. Her hands were shaking as she handed me the papers, and the smell of fear sweat overpowered her expensive perfume. "Marcus, I want to make this right between us," she said, her voice artificially sweet. "This settlement offers you fair market value for your property, plus $50,000 for any inconvenience you've experienced." The contract was actually brilliant legal manipulation. Buried in the fine print was language admitting I'd been unlawfully harassing the HOA and agreeing to never discuss our business disagreements publicly. Signing would have meant confessing to her crimes while accepting payment to stay silent about her decade-long murder conspiracy. "Brenda, this is attempted bribery and witness tampering." "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her trembling hands gave her away. "This is just a neighborly settlement to avoid any unpleasant legal proceedings." "You mean the legal proceedings where you get charged with murdering Mrs. Stella?" Her mask finally slipped completely. "That old woman was weak. She should have sold when I first asked. Everything that happened to her was her own fault for being stubborn. I had it all on camera. A confession to deliberately causing Mrs. Stella's death, admission of the harassment campaign, and attempted bribery to cover up her crimes." Friday morning brought Brenda's final desperate act. I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and "murderer" spray-painted across my front door. Anonymous flyers throughout both neighborhoods now claimed I had killed Mrs. Stella and was threatening other elderly residents. The projection was pathological. She was accusing me of her own crimes while escalating her attacks to include property destruction and defamation. But here's what she didn't know. Rebecca Stella had been coordinating with law enforcement all week. Every crime Brenda committed was being documented as evidence for multiple felony charges. That evening, I got the call I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with the County Sheriff's Office. We're ready to move forward with arrests. Are you prepared for tomorrow's City Council meeting?" The trap was set. Brenda would attend the meeting expecting another opportunity to attack me publicly. Instead, she'd be walking into a room full of law enforcement, media, and evidence of her decade-long crime spree. The taste of justice was about to become a feast. The Maple Grove City Council meeting room had never seen anything like Tuesday night's crowd. Every seat was filled, cameras from 3 news stations lined the back wall, and Detective Morrison sat in the front row with a warrant folded in her jacket pocket. The air buzzed with anticipation, and the smell of nervous sweat mixed with courthouse coffee. People whispered in hushed tones about rumors of corruption and scandal that had been circulating all week. Brenda arrived fashionably late, wearing her most expensive suit and the confident smile of someone who thought she still controlled the narrative. Roger followed behind her, looking like a man walking to his execution. She had no idea she was about to become the star of her own public destruction. "Good evening, everyone," Mayor Davidson called the meeting to order. "Tonight we have several important items on our agenda, including Councilman Whitmore's neighborhood improvement proposal." Roger stood up nervously, shuffling his papers. "Thank you, Mayor Davidson. As you know, certain properties in our community have been challenging to maintain proper standards." "Point of order." Rebecca Chen stood up from the audience, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Before we discuss neighborhood improvements, I think the council should be aware of some criminal activities that have been taking place under the guise of community standards." Mayor Davidson looked confused. "Ma'am, this isn't the time for public comments." "Actually, it's exactly the time," Detective Morrison announced, standing and showing her badge. "This is a criminal matter that directly relates to tonight's agenda." Brenda's confident smile flickered for the first time. "I don't know what this is about, but I object to these interruptions." "Mrs. Whitmore," Rebecca said, connecting her laptop to the projection system, "perhaps you'd like to explain this." The first image filled the screen, Brenda's internal HOA memo from 2019, outlining strategies for forcing non-HOA property sales through harassment and manufactured violations. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Brenda's face went white as she realized what was happening. "That document is taken out of context," she shouted, jumping to her feet. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." Then perhaps you can provide context for this, Rebecca said, clicking to the next slide. Audio filled the room, Brenda's voice discussing planting evidence in my garage, bribing city officials, and deliberately causing Mrs. Chen's death through psychological warfare. Her own words condemned her as the room listened in horrified silence. "Where did you get that?" Brenda screamed, all pretense of composure shattered. "Those recordings are illegal." "Actually, they were provided by your own private investigator, who was uncomfortable with your criminal instructions," Detective Morrison announced. "Larry Stubbs is cooperating fully with our investigation." The next slide showed the property transaction map Tony had created, visually demonstrating the decade-long pattern of harassment followed by below-market sales to Whitmore Development subsidiaries. "This is a coordinated real estate fraud scheme that has operated for over 10 years, Rebecca continued. Mrs. Brenda Whitmore has systematically terrorized elderly and vulnerable homeowners, forcing them to sell their properties below market value for her personal profit. "Lies!" Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking like breaking glass. "All lies!" But the evidence kept coming. Video of her vandalizing my sprinkler system, audio of her coaching fake federal agents, documentation of bribes paid to city officials, evidence of her breaking into my house to steal documents. Roger tried to distance himself. I had no knowledge of my wife's activities. "Shut up, Roger!" Brenda screamed at her husband. "You knew exactly what we were doing. You helped plan everything." The room fell dead silent as she accidentally implicated her husband in the conspiracy. Mayor Davidson's gavel shook in his hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, you need to calm down." "Calm down!" she exploded, spittle flying from her mouth. "These people are trying to destroy everything I've built. I've worked for years to make this neighborhood perfect. By murdering Mrs. Chen?" I stood up from the back of the room. Brenda spun around like a wild animal, her eyes blazing with fury. "That old woman deserved what she got. She should have moved when I told her to." The confession hung in the air like poison gas. News cameras captured every word as Brenda admitted to deliberately causing an elderly woman's death. Detective Morrison stepped forward. "Brenda Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse resulting in death, filing false police reports, bribery of public officials, breaking and entering, and attempted evidence tampering." As the handcuffs clicked around Brenda's wrists, she let out one final scream. "This neighborhood will never be the same without me." "You're absolutely right," I called out as she was led away. "It's going to be much better." The room erupted in applause as justice finally arrived for the suburban tyrant who had terrorized innocent families for a decade. Roger Whitmore resigned his council position effective immediately. The HOA called emergency elections, and 3 news stations led their broadcasts with the story of how one man's refusal to be intimidated brought down an entire criminal conspiracy. The taste of victory was sweeter than I'd ever imagined. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch sipping coffee and watching kids play in what used to be Brenda's perfectly manicured lawn when Detective Morrison stopped by with the final update. "Thought you'd want to know," she said, settling into my spare chair with a satisfied grin. "Brenda pled guilty to all charges this morning. 15 years in federal prison, no parole possibility for 10 years. The numbers were staggering. $3.2 million in fraudulent property transactions over a decade, plus another $800,000 in victim damages. Mrs. Stella's family alone received a settlement that would fund college educations for her great-grandchildren. She also has to personally apologize to every family she harassed," Morrison added with obvious satisfaction. Judge made it a condition of her plea deal. Watching her grovel to the Rodriguez family was absolutely beautiful. Roger got 5 years and permanent ban from public service. 3 city officials lost their jobs and pensions for accepting bribes. The landscape company that kept accidentally damaging properties was fined into bankruptcy. But the sweetest justice was watching Brenda's perfect world crumble. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. Her Lexus was seized as proceeds of crime. Even her precious HOA presidency was dissolved when the state attorney general placed the association under federal oversight for corruption. The community transformation was miraculous. The new HOA board, led by Mrs. Rodriguez and Jake Patterson, immediately eliminated arbitrary fines and surveillance tactics. They established transparent budgets, resident protection policies, and actual democratic governance. Neighbors who'd been terrorized for years suddenly bloomed like flowers after a long winter. Colorful mailboxes appeared overnight. Creative gardens replaced sterile landscaping. The oppressive beige conformity gave way to joyful diversity. My orange mailbox became a neighborhood landmark, with tourists actually stopping to take photos of the mailbox that brought down a criminal conspiracy. Local news stations still use it as a symbol of grassroots resistance to suburban tyranny. Rebecca Stella transformed her legal victory into the Mrs. Stella Memorial Legal Aid Foundation, providing free representation for homeowners facing HOA abuse nationwide. The foundation's $2 million startup budget came entirely from Brenda's forfeited criminal assets. Your grandmother's death saved hundreds of families from the same torture, I told Rebecca during the foundation's launch ceremony. She'd be proud that her suffering prevented others from experiencing the same hell. My own life had reached peaceful perfection. The media attention brought consulting clients who specifically wanted to hire the guy who defeated HOA corruption. My daughter Zoe wrote her award-winning senior thesis on community organizing, inspired by watching her dad fight systemic abuse. The house itself became my pride and joy. I finished the basement workshop, installed a beautiful kitchen, and created a memorial garden where Mrs. Stella's roses still bloom every spring. Property values increased 20% once word spread about the corruption cleanup turns out. Buyers prefer honest neighborhoods over pretty facades hiding criminal enterprises. But the most beautiful change was our annual Good Neighbor Festival celebrating Mrs. Stella's memory. Every June, we close the street for a massive block party featuring diverse music, international food, and children playing freely without fear of violation notices. The smell of Korean barbecue now drifts from the Rodriguez family's yard. The sound of children's laughter fills spaces where Brenda's threats once poisoned every interaction. Neighbors actually know each other's names and help during emergencies. Last month, a young black family moved into Brenda's foreclosed house, exactly the kind of family her racist policies tried to exclude. Their first act was painting their door bright purple and planting a rainbow garden that would have given Brenda a stroke. Their twin toddlers now play hopscotch on the same driveway where Brenda once screamed about property values and community standards. Justice served with a side of pure irony. Sometimes defeating bullies isn't just about punishment. It's about healing communities and building something beautiful from the wreckage of corruption. As Detective Morrison prepared to leave, she grinned and pointed across town. Speaking of beautiful justice, turns out Brenda had a sister running the same scam in Riverside Hills. The FBI is very interested in your documentation methods. I smiled, already tasting the sweet flavor of round 2. Detective, some people never learn that every tyrant eventually meets their match. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare. You're not alone in this fight. Subscribe to Karen's Stories if you want to see more ordinary people taking down corrupt systems and building better communities. Remember, document everything, stay legal, and never let the tyrants win. Justice tastes better when it's served community style.